Welcome, everybody. A happy New Year and a happy Monday to you all. This is the Manuscript Monday event series for January, getting us started off with the new year here. My name is Lee Cathanis. For those of you we haven't met yet, we've got a lot of people attending, and it's very exciting to have you here with us. I'll be your tech director for the evening. I'm looking after any tech difficulties and following along with you here. So I'm going to go ahead and leave my email in the chat box there. You'll see that pop up in a moment. So feel free to reach out if you're having trouble hearing or seeing anything like that, or any other questions along the way. With that, as far as housekeeping, you'll see that comment section there. You'll be able to chat with everybody here. So let's make sure that's on for everybody. So you'll see that pop up. Feel free to drop in your name, say hello, let us know where you're joining us from, things you're excited about for this evening. And then you'll also see at the bottom a Q&A box there. So this is going to be more of an open discussion here with our speaker, Joel Silver. And we're looking forward to a lively conversation there. So we're going to direct any questions that you might have into that Q&A box. You'll also see the option to raise your hand in the little attendee box there. If you have something you'd like to comment or question out loud, we'll do that. You'll see that a prompt that'll come up to turn your microphone on, and you can chat with us that way. We'll keep those questions kind of prompt and short and precise as much as we want to hear from you. We've got a lot of folks coming in there. So thanks everybody for joining up. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jay Godmore with the Manuscript Society, who will tell us a little bit more about what we're getting into this evening.
Oh, welcome everybody. Great turnout. Thanks for joining us to this Monday evening, the first Manuscript Monday of 2025. We're excited to have Joel Silver here. The Manuscript Society is an organization of autograph and manuscript collectors. It was founded in 1948 as the National Society of Autograph Collectors, but in 1953 became the Manuscript Society. It includes collectors, manuscript curators, archivists, dealers, and anybody collected in handwritten documents and signed documents. It publishes a quarterly journal called Manuscripts, and also a quarterly newsletter called the Manuscript Society News. And every month we have this monthly webinar, Manuscript Mondays. We're very excited tonight to have Joel Silver with us. He's going to be talking about J.K. Lilly Jr., the funder and founder of the Lilly Library at Indiana University. Joel Silver was appointed the director of the Lilly Library in 2013. He served in several capacities in the Lilly Library before becoming director. He started his career at the Lilly Library in 1983, and he has served as head of public services, curator of books, associate director and interim director for 2 different appointments. He's also an adjunct associate professor and director of the Special Collections Specialization in the IU School of Library and Information Science. He's also an adjunct faculty member in the Department of English. And he also serves as a faculty member at the Rare Book School at the University of Virginia. We're very excited to have him here today. Please, we've got some questions to start off with, but please ask as many questions you can. We're very excited to have him here. He's a wealth of knowledge about rare books, manuscripts, special collections, and it's going to be wonderful. So thank you very much, Joel, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
So I'm going to start off with the first question. What were the primary collecting interests of J.K. Lilly Jr.?
Well, he had a great many collecting interests during his lifetime. Books and manuscripts formed his first serious collecting interest, and he began collecting rare books and manuscripts in the mid-1920s. This year we'll be celebrating the 100th anniversary of the beginning of his collecting. As was the case, and still is from time to time with many collectors, J.K. Lilly Jr. started by collecting standard sets of authors, things in fine bindings, things that appealed to him visually. But he soon found out that those were not really the kinds of books that more serious book collectors collected. And he began to read more about book collecting and began to read dealers' catalogs, visit more bookshops. And, he was off and running with his collecting of books and manuscripts. And during his time collecting books and manuscripts, which ran from about the mid-1920s through the mid-1950s, he focused on several different areas, first with Indiana literature, then expanding that to collect American literature more broadly, beginning with Mark Twain and Edgar Allan Poe. Then he moved into highlights of English literature. He collected American history, historical Americana, high spots in science and medicine, voyages and travels, also world literature. And he was always much more interested in text than illustration, and that came out in his collecting of both books and manuscripts. So those were the main focuses of his collecting of books and manuscripts, and I'm sure I'll be talking a lot more about that in the coming minutes. But he also collected coins and stamps, built up major collections of those models of yachts that had won the America's Cup, was interested in nautical history, was interested in military history, built up a collection of military miniatures, was interested in early American arms, collected Kentucky rifles and some edged weapons. And, some of his collections in those areas can be seen today at the Heritage Museum in Sandwich, Massachusetts, which was founded by J.K. Lilly Jr.'s son, J.K. Lilly III. We'll probably talk a little more about that later. But as you can see, he collected in many, many different areas, and we were very fortunate to receive his books and manuscripts in the mid-1950s.
Another follow-up question. What inspired his collecting interests?
I think he had always been interested in collecting. There are, documents that survive from his childhood where he was making, Christmas request lists to his parents, and they often included books and toy soldiers, among other things, both of which he collected in later life. But he was an avid reader, and I think that's really what inspired his collecting. The overarching theme in all of his collecting was a real love of history and a love of the artifacts of history. And that's what inspired him to collect books and manuscripts, and later inspired him to collect the coins and the stamps as well. And that kind of thing runs throughout his collecting.
What are the primary collecting areas of the Lilly Library today?
Well, we collect in all of the areas that J.K. Lilly collected, but every library like the Lilly, large scale special collections library, is a collection of collections. And J.K. Lilly's collection is one of the cores, the main core that led to the founding of our library. But we have since added literally hundreds of collections, both in the areas in which J.K. Lilly Jr. collected, as well as many, many different areas. We've gone beyond what he collected, certainly in terms of the time period. We collect later 20th and 21st century materials. We collect much more popular culture than he did, although he collected that kind of material for the 19th century. He was very interested in children's books, very interested in regional literature, but he collected in those areas, and we've continued to do that. We also are collecting things that were outside the canon of collecting interests that collectors of J.K. Lilly's day had, and so we're trying to be much more inclusive in our collecting, both in terms of, more racially inclusive materials, sexually inclusive materials, as well as materials that are much less geographically restricted than any single collector would have been able to collect. And although J.K. Lilly collected world literature, we have collected in so many other different areas beyond the areas that he focused on. Recent collections include a large collection of romance novels that was formed by Rebecca Romney of Type Punch Matrix, and we've added to that, and that's the subject of our current exhibition now, Love in the Library. And we've also collected historical dictionaries, and that will be the focus of our next major exhibition that is subject oriented that we'll be doing early next year. We also recently have collected materials relating to the history of conjuring, and we have the papers of the magician Ricky Jay, and we're in the process of acquiring the library of the Canadian magician David Ben, and that'll be the subject of an exhibition in the fall of 2026. So these are just, a few of the collecting areas, but what we're trying to do is collect in a wide variety of areas, and that also enables us to see new connections between the collections that we have. I mean, as an example, one of the collections that J.K. Lilly built was within his overall book collecting was on the history of science and medicine. And more recently, about 15 years ago, we received a donation from Doctors Bouchon and Beasley of the collection, large collection on historical dermatology, which builds on J.K. Lilly's medical collection, but goes well beyond that in highlighting that particular specialty, which is fascinating because of not only the text, but the illustrations and the numerous illustration methods that were used and continue to be used to illustrate dermatology books. So if I go on with this, it'll take up the entire hour, but I just wanted to say that our collecting is both broad and deep in so many different subject areas. And during the course of our conversation, I know we'll post the URL for the Lilly Library website, and you can get a sense from browsing on the website how many different areas we're collecting today.
Great. I've got a couple more questions, but if the participants want to start adding questions to the Q&A, I'll follow up with Joel and ask those questions for you. If you want to ask live, just raise your hand and Lee, make your video available, and Lee can make your video available so you can ask the question live. One of the questions I have, Joel, is how does the Lilly acquire many of its new collections?
Well, we acquire our collections both by purchase and by gift. The Bouchon Beasley collection of historical dermatology was and continues to be, as the donor supplemented, donation. And the Ricky J. Papers collection, that was a purchase. So each year we make purchases both of individual books and manuscripts, and we also receive gifts of books and manuscripts, some individual things, sometimes small collections, but we have to be very, very selective in what we accept, as all libraries do for various reasons. And so, we have built up our collections through the generosity of donors, and also through who donated their collections, and through the generosity of donors who donated funds so that we could continue to acquire collections. We do receive support from Indiana University, support from the state of Indiana, but with the market in rare books and manuscripts, which has been rising in so many areas over the years, we depend on donations as well.
Great. Here's a question from Stuart Bennett. The Lilly's wonderful collections of manuscripts include the James Bond novels. Do you know if J.K. Lilly ever read Ian Fleming?
No, I do not. David Randall never, as far as I know, never mentioned to anybody any interest that J.K. Lilly might have had in Ian Fleming. He did read a lot of fiction, but I don't know whether he read any James Bond novels. The Ian Fleming collection was another very interesting acquisition. The Ian Fleming was, before he started writing the James Bond novels, was involved in a number of different business dealings, and he formed a collection in the 1930s through the bookseller Percy Muir of what Fleming called books that had, made a difference, books that had started something. He wanted to, and he came up with that in his talks with Muir, who was, by the time he was working with Fleming, the proprietor of the firm Elkin Matthews. And what Fleming had a little bit of money from a stock transaction. He wanted to start this collection. He felt that collecting was something that a gentleman did. And so he also knew that the major things that, collectors always talk about, Gutenberg Bibles, Shakespeare First Folios, well out of his financial range, and he wanted his money to go as far as possible. And at that time, in the early 1930s, when the collection was started, 19th and early 20th century and also 18th century, science, medicine, technology was selling for very, very little money, except for a few high spots. And so Fleming, over a period of a few years through the bookseller Percy Muir, built up a remarkable collection of these things. And these books and articles, periodical articles, were exhibited briefly in 1940 in England, but then they were essentially put in storage. But booksellers knew about them. David Randall, who was one of J.K. Lilly's principal booksellers, and who also was the first director of the Lilly Library, and who came to Indiana in the mid-1950s, tried to buy Fleming's collection, but Fleming wouldn't sell. He viewed it as a hedge against inflation. And we were finally able to acquire it several years after his death, purchasing it from his family. And as part of the purchase, we got Fleming's library that he had formed with Percy Muir, and also the corrected typescripts of most of the novels and Fleming's copies of first editions of the novels. So, I mean, people who visit the library are often surprised, if they're coming for, a certain research area, to find all of the other things that we have, and let's say the corrected typescripts of Goldfinger, for example, is something that people don't expect to find at the Lilly unless they knew something about its history and the history of what happened to Fleming's manuscripts.
When did J.K. Lilly start to donate to Indiana?
He started to donate to Indiana in 1954, and his donations ran from 54 to 57. J.K. Lilly started collecting, as I said, in the 1920s, and by the mid-50s, he had put together a collection of about 20,000 books and probably 17 or 18,000 manuscripts, if you counted each piece of paper separately. Now, the vast majority of those manuscripts were from two collections. There were two collections of literary manuscripts, James Whitcomb Riley and Lew Wallace. And there were a few other large groups of papers relating to Indiana history or Indiana literature. But the rest of his manuscripts, and I'll talk about those in more detail, were several hundred historical and literary manuscripts, usually autographed letters signed, occasionally longer manuscripts, like the manuscript of Peter Pan, which we have an illustration of that Lee can show, the original J.M. Barrie Peter Pan. But as he was collecting books and manuscripts, he was able to put together a very, very interesting collection. And I think what happened was that in the 1940s, as he began to collect first stamps in the late 1940s and then coins in the early 1950s, he began to realize that he had achieved what he wanted to with his book and manuscript collecting. I mean, to the point where in the early 1950s, he turned down a Gutenberg Bible that he was offered. And I think he began to realize as a collector that if he was going to turn down a Gutenberg Bible, where was he really going as a book and manuscript collector? And he decided to donate his collection to IU and to focus more on his coins and stamps. And he did focus on his coins and stamps for the rest of his life. So the collection began to come to Indiana University in 1954, and the donations were made through 57. And the collection was of such stature that the president of IU at that time, Herman B. Wells, realized that there should be a separate building that should house J.K. Lilly's collection and the collections that IU Special Collections had already had acquired. There was a Department of Special Collections that was established in 1942. And so the Lilly Library was built, and we opened in October of 1960, and it incorporated J.K. Lilly's collection, as well as the collections that IU had acquired, which included a large Western Americana collection, a major Abraham Lincoln collection, great deal of American history, some good literary collections, but nothing like the collection that J.K. Lilly donated in the mid-50s.
Does the Lilly Library include other paper products such as colonial currency, lottery tickets, and revenue stamps?
There's, I don't, well, we have revenue stamps incidentally on some documents. And as any document collector knows, some of those documents have also had the revenue stamps cut out. But we have a little bit of colonial currency, more in the way of 19th century currency, but quite a lot of correspondence, that came in other collections. There's also quite a lot of material in terms of letters and documents in J.K. Lilly's collection, but we didn't get any of the revenue stamps or the currency that he might have had. All of that material was sold later.
And tell us a little bit about who J.K. Lilly was, like a biographical information about him, separate from his collecting.
He was a member of the Lilly family of Indianapolis, the proprietors of Eli Lilly and Company. He was the grandson of the founder of the company. He was born in 1893 and he died in 1966. He got a pharmacy degree from the University of Michigan. He served in the First World War, and he spent the rest of his career with Eli Lilly and Company as an executive, as president, as chairman of the board of directors. He was very involved in organization and employee relations. He had a very, very busy business career, but throughout his business career, he was able to focus on his love of history as well, to work on his books and manuscripts, his nautical collections, his stamps, his coins, and others. And with the resources that he had, he was able to achieve remarkable things in each of those areas.
How did David Randall influence J.K. Lilly's private collecting? And can you talk a bit about Randall going on to become the first director?
David Randall was a bookseller in New York. He began, working for himself and then working with Max Hartsoff at the Aldous Book Company, and then became head of the rare book department at the Scribner bookstore in New York. In those days, a lot of the major publishing houses had bookshops, and some of those bookshops, like Scribner's, had rare book departments. And Randall was able to get to know J.K. Lilly Jr. Lilly bought from a number of different New York booksellers, and Randall was a very, very intelligent bookseller, had a good knowledge of rare books in general and a very good knowledge of American literature. And that was an area that J.K. Lilly was really focusing more on in the 1930s and 40s. And so although the first interactions between and sales of books from Randall to Lilly were, small and a little bit tentative, I think Lilly was able to see how perceptive Randall was, the kind of stock that Scribner's had, and also the fact that, especially beginning in the mid-1930s, that Scribner's had a London branch that was headed by John Carter, and many people in attendance tonight know the name John Carter, who would later go on to write Taste and Technique in Book Collecting and ABC for book collectors. And Carter was able to supply a lot of the major books in literature, especially world literature, that Lilly was looking for. And, with Randall being more and more of an advisor to Lilly, his influence grew. Now, I say an advisor to Lilly, but I need to also say that Lilly listened to advice from a lot of booksellers, but the final decisions were always his. I was talking about the historical manuscripts and literary manuscripts that Lilly had. One thing that he didn't have, which every bookseller he worked with advised him to buy at least one example of, was a medieval illuminated manuscript. And he never did, because he really was focused on text rather than illustration. He didn't care that much about having a manuscript just because people said he needed an illuminated manuscript. And so he never bought one. Same thing is true of a lot of the things that booksellers advised him to do. They could offer him things, but he would always make the final decision. And there were many, many things that booksellers sent to him. They said, "I know you'll be interested in this," and he then sent it back saying, "Well, it's a very nice book, but it's not within my collecting plan. It just doesn't inspire me." And so, but Randall developed a special relationship with Lilly, was able to find very good things, particularly in American literature and history, and through John Carter in world literature and early printed books. And so they had developed such a close relationship by the early 1950s that when it came time for Lilly to decide to part with his collection, at first, I think he was thinking about selling it, but eventually he decided to donate it. And Randall was a natural choice for the director of what would become the Lilly Library. He was one of two candidates for that, the other being John Carter, and Randall got the position and came to Indiana in 1956 as the head of rare books and professor of bibliography. Then when the Lilly Library was built, he became the Lilly librarian.
Great, thank you, Joel.
I should also
Aaron.
mention just one more thing, that if you want to read more about Randall, his book of memoirs that he wrote called Dukedom Large Enough, it's one of the best bookseller memoirs. There's a chapter in there on J.K. Lilly Jr. and his collecting. I didn't know Randall. I came to the Lilly too late to know him. He died in the mid-1970s. But there were a lot of people working at the Lilly when I started in 1983 who knew Dave Randall. And they said he had a lot of great stories. And one of his, adages that he would say all the time was that you never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And that's certainly the case in Dukedom Large Enough. The core of truth is there, but you can't rely on that book for all of the details of any of the things he's writing about. But he handled all the manuscripts and books he said he did, and it gives wonderful pictures of the collectors and booksellers of that day. And he really tells some good stories.
Donald Farron, does that answer your question? And would you like to follow up with any? You're on mute.
That answers it very well. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Don. It's good to see you.
Nice to see you.
What is the oldest item in your collection?
The oldest items are a few Babylonian clay tablets and cones from about 2000 to 2200 BCE. Those didn't come from J.K. Lilly's collection. Those came from a few different collections. But Indiana University was not involved in archaeological expeditions in other parts of the world in the 19th century as some other major institutions were. So we don't have a large collection of things of that period. Our collection really begins with the medieval and Renaissance manuscripts. And as I said, J.K. Lilly didn't collect in that area. And so within a few years after the donation of J.K. Lilly's collection, we were able to acquire two major collections of medieval and Renaissance manuscripts, one from George Poole in Chicago, who was mostly a book collector, but also had a select collection of very important medieval and Renaissance manuscripts. We acquired that in 1958. And then in 1962, we acquired the collection that had been formed by the Chicago calligrapher C.L. Ricketts. And together with those and the other things, other examples we've acquired over the years, we now have many hundreds of codices and fragments of medieval and Renaissance manuscripts. We have, about 700 or so 15th century books, 700 incunabula, and thousands of 16th century books, many more 17th and 18th century books. So our collections range from 2000 BCE to 2024. I don't know if we've acquired any 2025 materials, but we will.
What's the most valuable item in the collection?
The most valuable item in the collection is the New Testament of the Gutenberg Bible. As I said, J.K. Lilly turned down a Gutenberg Bible, but the Poole collection did have a Gutenberg New Testament, and we were very fortunate to acquire that. And the other valuable things in the collection include a Shakespeare First Folio. J.K. Lilly bought a set of the 4 folios in the mid-1930s. And so we have that, Audubon's Birds of America, also from J.K. Lilly's collection. And then not from J.K. Lilly's collection, we acquired it in the 1970s, was George Washington's letter accepting the presidency. And J.K. Lilly had a number of Washington letters and other pieces, but that was one that we acquired in the early 1970s. So there are many important items in the Lilly. Those are usually the first few that people talk about when they're talking about valuable items in the library.
Which piece has the best backstory?
That's one I can't answer because so many pieces have great backstories. I mean, one of the things that I know we have an illustration of is an unassuming looking thing from George Washington that was probably dated 1773. And this is something from J.K. Lilly's collection. As you see, it's partly printed, partly manuscript. And the manuscript notes are George Washington's notes. And this relates to a land speculation deal in West Virginia. And this was a prospectus, and it's George Washington's notes on what his offering and what he was going to sell. And this was something that J.K. Lilly bought from the famous dealer A.S.W. Rosenbach in the late 1940s. John Fleming, who was working for Rosenbach, visited Lilly in Indianapolis. Lilly had a separate library that he had built in the 1930s, and Fleming visited Lilly. And one of the things he brought with him was this document. And as far as anybody knew or knew then or knows today, this is the only example of the document that had survived. Lilly asked where it came from, and Fleming did more research on it and asked everyone at the Rosenbach company. He said, well, it was found in a drawer in Dr. Rosenbach's office, and nobody could remember where it came from. So those are the kinds of backstories that we have, and there are many, many more. Everything in the library has a story. And it's these kinds of stories that also appealed to J.K. Lilly. And it's the kinds of stories that we tell every day when we are doing presentations to classes and other groups. It's one of the things that makes it so fascinating for us to continue to work at the Lilly Library and for people to visit and see some of these things.
Which acquisitions involved jumping through the most hoops?
It was definitely the Fleming collection. Because the acquisition, if you count the time that Randall spent before he came to the Lilly Library, before he came to Indiana University, to purchase the Fleming collection, to the time we got it, we're talking about a period of 25 years or so. I mean, and it involved a lot of back and forth between Randall, between Bill Cagle, who succeeded Randall as director, but who was involved in the negotiations in the 1960s, and Fleming and Fleming's lawyers, very, very involved. You know, lots of other collections have had some involvement. I mean, one of the collections that we have and that is wonderful to see at the Lilly Library is the Jerry Slocum puzzle collection. And this is a collection that came to us in 2006. And we had been working with Jerry Slocum on bringing that collection to the Lilly Library since at least 1993. And that involved a lot of talks about facilities, how we would service the collection, and how we would catalog it, what we would be able to make available. And very glad that everything came to fruition in that. And Mr. Slocum is still collecting. He's in his early 90s, and we still receive puzzles from him. We also have a full-time curator of puzzles at the Lilly, Andrew Rhoda, who takes care of these things.
Indiana University has a team of researchers studying the work of Isaac Newton. Did Lilly's collection have any Newton manuscripts?
No, didn't have any Newton manuscripts, but it had other manuscripts from Newton's period. And the Lilly Library has a number of manuscripts from Newton's period. So they've been studying the inks and the papers that were used in the other manuscripts. Excuse me. But unfortunately, we don't have any Newton manuscripts. The J.K. Lilly did have a first edition of the 1687 Newton Principia. His collection in the history of science and medicine was wonderful. A lot of the high spots, and in medical books, for example, one of the last major books he acquired was the William Harvey De Motu Cordis, the 1628, and this is one of few copies in its original binding. And considering that this copy is always, these books are always found with brown paper, our copy is in very good condition. But there's the illustration of the title page and or the plate that shows the circulation of the blood.
Here's a question from one of your colleagues, Brad Cook. Did J.K. Lilly meet with the other collectors and possibly buy from them or sell to them?
Not as far as I know. He became a member of the Grolier Club in 1928, but I don't know that he attended many Grolier Club meetings. He didn't lend for exhibition, and the only time he did an exhibition, I think, was to exhibit a small number of books at the Eli Lilly and Company headquarters, a number of his medical books, and there's a photo that shows him putting some books in a case. But otherwise, when David Randall wrote an article about J.K. Lilly for the periodical The Book Collector, he entitled it America's Quiet Collector, because he really was. I mean, Lilly preferred to study these things and on his own, and he would spend a long time with his collections, and he would show them to some people who were interested, but only the people who were interested in that particular type of his collection. And for example, the people who knew Lilly collected books really didn't know he collected coins or stamps in the 1950s or 60s, and vice versa. And so I don't think he bought from other collectors, and he bought from a number of dealers, but it was a relatively small number of dealers. I mean, certainly several dozen, but he had his favorites. And so, in answer to Brad's question, no, I mean, I think he preferred to collect very, very quietly. There was one exception to that, and that was in the late 1920s when he was collecting primarily Twain and Poe and highlights of English literature. And as people who collect Poe know, the most difficult book to get is his first one, published anonymously, Tamerlane and Other Poems, simply by a Bostonian. Poe's name isn't even on the title page. And Lilly was collecting Poe, and he wanted a copy of Tamerlane, but there weren't copies around. So he was working with Charles Goodspeed of Goodspeed's Bookshop in Boston. And Goodspeed was looking for a copy of Tamerlane, and a copy did turn up, which he offered to J.K. Lilly Jr. And it was a very high price, but Lilly wanted the book and he paid it, and it was $20,000. And this, the book has since sold for, many, many times that, but this is in very, very good condition with the original wrappers. And I think for the first and last time in his life, Lilly was proud enough of an acquisition to let other people know about it. And word soon got out to the Indianapolis newspapers that Lilly paid a record price, which it was then for a record price for an American book. And so there were articles in the papers about that. Everyone wanted to come and see the book, and he learned his lesson and never really talked about his collecting in that way again. But the story wasn't all bad as far as the publicity, because one of the letters that he received due to the publicity, I mean, because he received dozens and dozens of offers of things, including an offer of the original tablets of the Ten Commandments. But one of the offers that he received was from a couple in Iowa who had a copy of the Eliot Indian Bible. And he did end up purchasing the book from them. They sent it to him for his examination. He collated it, found it lacked 3 leaves, contacted Goodspeeds in Boston, and Goodspeeds happened to have those missing leaves, not from that copy, but they had a number of leaves, single leaves from the Eliot Indian Bible, and they sent it to him to complete the book, and so he was able to get it. But otherwise, he didn't buy privately, bought from recognized dealers, only bid at auction occasionally, and then always through a bookseller.
Great. Now, other than the Gutenberg Bible or the medieval illuminated manuscript, is there anything that you know of that Lilly was offered that you regard as the one that got away?
There were a lot of them. I mean, one of the things that I wish, in going through his correspondence years ago when we were celebrating the 100th anniversary of his birth, and I saw that he had been offered in the late 1940s, he had been offered by the Robinson brothers in London, who were the purchasers of the residue of the Sir Thomas Phillips collection, been offered a copy of the 1457 Psalter, and which there are so few copies around, but that wasn't of interest to him, and so he turned it down. Yes, I wish he would have taken it, but on the other hand, the money that he didn't spend on the Psalter at that time, he did spend toward a large collection, large for him, because he bought single items usually, not collections, a large collection of Americana that he bought in the early 1950s. And that gave us a number of our early voyages and travels, the early editions of the Columbus letter and many, many other things. So I can't say, I mean, there are always regrets. And when you start looking at correspondence, and this is the case with reading booksellers' memoirs. I mean, whenever you're looking at something from decades past, you always regret things when you see those prices. But at the same time, I think he spent his collecting budget very, very well. And I can't think of too many things that he bought that I wish he didn't, or too many things he was offered that I can say, well, I wish that he took that instead of, something else that he bought.
What was the value of Lilly's collection when it came to Indiana at the time?
It was appraised at $5 million. And that was in, the mid 1950s. So, you can extrapolate that today. But I mean, there are so many items in Mr. Lilly's collection that were appraised, at what their fair market value was in the 1950s that today, you just couldn't get at all. I mean, just in terms of prices and looking at old catalogs and prices, one of the things I always go back to is correspondence that he had with A.S.W. Rosenbach, the bookseller, in the 1930s when Lilly was building up his collection of historical Americana, and he was sent him a list, sent Rosenbach a list of certain things that he wanted, and one of the things he asked Rosenbach to find for him was a first edition of the Book of Mormon, the 1830 Book of Mormon. And Rosenbach immediately wrote back and said, well, we have several copies in stock. Do you want, and the price will depend on the condition. And Lilly, of course, said he wanted something in the best condition possible. And so so Rosenbach sent him his best copy of the Book of Mormon, which in the original binding, and the price was $85. And so anyone who knows the book market today knows that it's a six-figure book, and that's what happens when you look at old prices.
Did the acquisition of Madeline Kripke's massive library of dictionaries expand on a collection originally established by Lilly?
Not really. I mean, Lilly had a few dictionaries in the collection. He had Noah Webster, and he had a Samuel Johnson dictionary. The Johnson dictionary he had because Johnson's dictionary was on the Grolier Club's list of 100 books famous in English literature, and the Webster's dictionary was in the Grolier Club's list of 100 influential American books that came out after the Second World War. So we had that, but the real collection that it expanded upon was a collection was formed by our previous director, Breon Mitchell. And Breon formed a collection of historical dictionaries, mostly dictionaries in which at least one of the languages was not English. And especially one of the languages was not European. So a great many oceanic dictionaries, African language dictionaries, all sorts of different dictionaries, and a few thousand dictionaries. And the Kripke collection really was an addition to the few things that Lilly had, the other dictionaries that we were able to acquire in between, and then the Breon Mitchell collection of dictionaries. And there's remarkably little overlap between the Kripke collection, because Kripke focused on English language dictionaries, although she had many other things, and focused on slang dictionaries. And so those two collections together gives us great strength in historical dictionaries.
What items were Lilly most proud to have in his collection?
I think the things that he was most proud of were some of the items that he had related to American history. I mean, certainly he liked English literature, and he liked, some of a lot of the American literature. I mean, he loved his Twain and Poe first editions, but it was some of the American history that I think he really did love, like the Declaration of Independence, the first printing of the Declaration of Independence that he acquired in the late 40s. And also he had a copy of the laws, the 1789 laws of the United States, the first printed laws, and the copy that Lilly was able to acquire, again in the late 1940s, was the copy that had been presented by George Washington as president to Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State. And that book has the first printing of the Bill of Rights, and there's a correction in Jefferson's hand from what was printed, which was cruel and unusual imprisonments, to crossing out the word imprisonments and replacing it with the word punishments written in. So, I mean, that was something that I think he was very, very proud of, and certainly his highlights in many other areas. But I think probably when I'm thinking of the books, it was books like that. Also, some of the medical books. He had a beautiful copy of the 1543 Vesalius, and he had a very nice copy of the Caxton Chaucer, for example, but it wasn't nearly as nice as some of the other things. So I think that Lilly's interest was primarily in history as well as in literature, and also in medical and scientific history. So while I think he liked everything that he had, there were certain things that obviously he liked more. A very personal collection for him was his collection of children's books. He did collect first editions of children's books, particularly American children's books. And one of the books that he read, one of the authors he read as a child was Harry Castleman, who did long series of boys' adventure stories. And he built up the world's largest collection of Harry Castleman books. Those he truly enjoyed as well. So, he was a collector who really did enjoy not only his books, but his other collections.
Were there any materials that got away that he really wanted but didn't acquire?
There were some, but one of the things that he had was patience, and he viewed his collecting he really took the long view of his collecting. I mean, as an example, he was a fisherman, and one of the books that every fisherman who loves books wants is a first edition of Isaac Walton's The Complete Angler. And there were several editions issued during Walton's lifetime, and they're all different. And so having a set of these early editions of The Complete Angler is something that he really wanted. And so he was offered a very nice set, but these books were in later bindings. And the way David Randall reported it, what Lilly said, when offered that, was that, fishermen and book collectors are patient souls. I'll wait. And so he waited. He waited for, at least 7 to 10 years or so. But a much better set came along, and it's one of the only sets that survive where each of the 5 editions is in its original binding, very, very fresh, and there isn't anything like it. So I don't know that he had any real regrets in his collecting career, because his interests were so wide-ranging that if something didn't work out, there were so many other things that did.
Which collections or items at the library generate the most interest from researchers?
Probably from researchers today, it's the modern manuscript collections. In addition to the collections I've mentioned, we have large collections of modern literary manuscripts. And so we have a lot of the manuscripts, for example, of Sylvia Plath. We have a lot of Orson Welles material, a lot of other film material. I mean, we have Peter Bogdanovich's papers. We have some of Fellini's papers. These are the kinds of collections that are generating a lot of interest from researchers. I mean, today, with the widespread availability of digital surrogates, digital images online of so many books, it's often manuscripts and particularly more contemporary manuscripts that can't really be put online for copyright reasons that researchers will come to see. Now, certainly there are many, many other collections and individual items that people come to the Lilly Library to see, but each year there are a number of manuscript collections that generate things. I mean, we have, the papers of Kurt Vonnegut, for example, Indiana author, and and dozens more collections of literary manuscripts. These are the things that probably generate the most, researcher activity from visiting researchers. But our research activity cuts across all of our collections. Our Latin American manuscripts that we received from Bernardo Mendel, those generate a great many research visits. And all of the things in the library and all of these subject areas we're using all the time for exhibitions and for class presentations as well. We have a very active education program where we do, more than 200 class presentations for visiting classes, mainly IU classes, but not limited to IU classes.
We have a lot of questions left, but we're getting close to time. So one more question.
Okay.
Did Lilly have what did he do when he acquired material? Did he have a personal librarian before he
did not.
the other Lilly?
No, he didn't. A lot of his correspondence with booksellers was typed up probably from dictation by his secretary. But unlike so many other collectors who amassed collections like this, Lilly did not have a personal librarian. He really was a hands-on person. And then there's lots of evidence in his correspondence with booksellers about receiving a book, examining it, collating it, checking it against the bibliography, and so forth. So he spent a remarkable amount of time thinking about his collection and working with his collection, with books and manuscripts, throughout his 30 years of collecting.
Well, I wish we had more time to ask you some more questions. That was fabulous. I'm sorry to those that didn't get your questions answered, but maybe Joel will come back sometime and do another session with us. So,
well, thank you. I would be happy to. And I just wanted to thank everyone for coming. I appreciate all the questions. I'm sorry I didn't get to answer all of them. But as I was talking, I realized, the focus here has been rightly so on J.K. Lilly. But one of the things that I'm not sure of is how comfortable J.K. Lilly Jr. would have been with that focus, because he was always self-effacing about his collections and about his abilities. And he, as an example, it's named the Lilly Library, but it's not named the J.K. Lilly Jr. Library. He was insistent that the library be named after the Lilly family. And I think that's where he would want the focus to be as well, that it was not only his generosity, but it's the generosity of the Lilly family and also Lilly Endowment that has enabled the Lilly Library to do what we do. And to read more about the activities of the Lilly family in philanthropy, I can recommend this book, The Three Generations of the Lilly Family, which talks about J.K. Lilly, his father, and his brother Eli, and their father and grandfather. And there's also mention of J.K. Lilly's son, J.K. Lilly III, who founded Heritage Museum. But this book is published by Indiana Historical Society. It's edited by Eli Lilly, the second J.K. Lilly's grandson, and Rebecca E. Lilly, J.K. Lilly's great-granddaughter. And I have a chapter in there on Lilly's book collecting. There's another chapter in there by Jennifer Madden that talks about the collections at the Heritage Museum and Gardens. And there are lots of other chapters about the other activities, including collecting activities of the Lilly family. So I just wanted to make sure that people were aware that Lilly's generosity in donating the collection was not an isolated incident in terms of how the family has interacted with people and institutions.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Joel. Thank you everybody for attending, and stay tuned for information on February's Manuscript Monday. So have a great evening, everybody. Thanks again, Joel.
Okay, thank you. And thanks to Lee for doing everything he did to make this work.
Great.
Thank you, Joel. Happy New Year, everyone. If you look on the Manuscript Society website there down below, manuscriptsociety.org, you'll learn more about the upcoming events, and you'll find the archives of all our other fantastic talks too. Thank you again, Joel Silver. Thank you, Jay Godmore, and we'll see you everybody next time.